I can hear you fine, Tom.
Perfect. We're not on yet. I've got a record playing, but I just thought I'd give you a call now. We've got about 2.5 minutes, and then we'll get you. I think we'll kick off with what it's like to be a reporter, and then about 24-hour news and how difficult it is to fill the news, and have a bit of a dig at you, and then we'll go into the stories that are going on around here. That was Kylie Minogue, I Believe in You. And on the telephone line, I believe we've got Andrew Drummond. Can you hear me?
I can hear you fine, Tom.
Oh, wow, the Andrew Drummond. You're either God's gift to news or you are the scourge of life. Which are you?
I'm probably God's gift to news in Thailand.
Let's just, I just got to look at your what would you call it, a resume or CV. Very, very hard on Pattaya businesses, a failed drunk hack living in a tin shack near Bangkok, simply picking on businesses in Pattaya because it's easier than ones closer to home, convicted of libel, lost your car and nearly deported. Where does that fit in? Is any of that true?
Well, can't think. Where does that come from, Tom?
Oh, I don't know. I really don't know. People just send me this stuff. You know, I have no idea at all. Actually, I've read it in local newspapers.
Well, I haven't read that anywhere myself.
No?
No.
Oh, really? Okay. Let me ask you a question.
But I mean, just read it back to me, and I'll take them one by one if you want.
Okay. Are you hard on Pattaya? Because first of all, let me introduce you. Andrew Drummond, a freelance journalist living in Bangkok, formerly working on the streets of shame, right?
Yeah, formerly working on the Observer, Times, Daily Mail, News of the World, Evening Standard.
Oh, were you on the News of the World? Oh dear. Did you ever tap a telephone?
No, when I was at News of the World, we didn't have mobile phones and we didn't have internet.
Oh, you had manual typewriters, I
suppose. We did for a while, yes.
God, can you actually do that? My mum could type with one of those manual typewriters.
Oh, yeah. When I was at Daily Mail, it was all manual from the local paper right until God knows when.
Were you one of those people that used to...
Computers, I think the first time I used a computer was the Olympic Games in L.A. in 1984.
Were you one of those people that you see in movies where they all rush to the telephone to try and get the telephone first to get the news through to their newsrooms?
Well, absolutely, and you'd have somebody holding onto the phone box for you to make sure that you got the line.
Putting the pennies and the threepenny bits in to make sure that they don't lose the line.
Well, they did have reverse charge calls in those days.
Let me ask you a question. What brought you to Thailand?
I was Southeast Asia correspondent for the Observer for quite a while, and I decided to stay. I mean, I went to the Observer and started a film company for them. And after we did the launch film, I'd found that my job as a foreign correspondent had been sort of taken over by somebody else.
Oh, right.
Did a period of TV in New York for Fox, actually, and decided to come back to Southeast Asia, which I'd taken a liking to.
And you spent, I mean, I've read your columns and your stuff whenever I can see it for a long, long time. You spent a lot of time looking or exposing things that were happening closer to home, really, around Bangkok to start with, didn't you?
Well, we do all over Thailand. In fact, I do most of Southeast Asia, but I've been doing less and less. I think the world is closing in on me, and all journalists to a certain extent. Newspapers are not sending like they used to. So I'm based in Bangkok. We do a lot of stuff down in Phuket, up in Chiang Mai. Pattaya is a particular problem because most of the controversial stuff which I'm doing appears to come from Pattaya.
Yeah, you do seem to be going for my city. And this is my city. This is my home. Why are you picking on Pattaya?
Well, we're not. We've picked on Hua Hin. We've done quite a few scams down in Hua Hin. But as I said, Pattaya does attract scammers.
Do you think so? I think it attracts...
I know so, Tom. I think you probably know that too.
Do you think we attract more scammers? We attract more than our fair share of scammers?
Yes, you've got a disproportionate number of them because of what Pattaya generally offers people, and you're going to get those sort of people coming in.
But a little while ago...
The problem about Pattaya is it's an upside-down town. I mean, in terms of foreigners, we're finding foreigners in quite respectable positions in Pattaya who have become the problems for other foreigners in the city.
Well, I do hope you appreciate that they are the minority of the expatriates who live here. There are actually some nice people live here too. You'd be quite surprised.
Yeah, of course there are, but they're the loud people. They're the people in the papers. They're the people in the big charity foundations like the Rotary and so on.
Well, I think, yeah, to be fair to organisations like the Rotary, and I know that there is a story that you're running right now, we can talk about that later on, but to be fair to the Rotary organisation, it's a huge worldwide organisation. Any organisation that is worldwide and huge, you're always going to find there's bad apples in the barrel, aren't you? It doesn't make the Rotary bad, it just means that there are certain individuals that manage to creep in there.
Well, I think in Pattaya, the fact that you now have 5 Rotary clubs tells you a story. That tells you there's been a lot of falling out between members of the Rotary clubs. But when you get people who've become presidents of Rotary clubs who, have got histories of pimping and violence abroad, you've got to wonder.
I have to be honest there, and I have to say to our listeners, you appreciate why I'm saying this, that the opinions that you're expressing are your opinions, not those of Pattaya 105.
No, it's not opinion. It's not opinion, Tom. It's just purely a statement of fact.
But when you say something, as I did, I do hope you appreciate when you say something on the radio, and it's very important for our listeners to know, to believe it or not, that when you say these things, you can actually back them up by proof.
Well, let's go on to the next story here. We've got lots of Britons here being swindled out of a condo.
Now, that's a very interesting story. Tell me,
condo on Pratamnak Hill there, and that's millions of baht. I mean, millions of pounds have disappeared.
Do you think, these stories, you've got a story that you're running at the moment where you're telling a story about these apartments that are being sold twice, perhaps, and where there's a mortgage being taken out on property that's already been sold to customers. You're running stories like that, and that's a very interesting story to read. You're running the story about this estate of houses, or subdivision if you're American. We talked about it on 105 without you knowing. This estate of houses that is up on Maprachan Lake where people have genuinely bought houses as genuine people, and for some reason somebody's taken out their electric meters. Now that's an interesting story because it's a good story to bring to light, because hopefully when you do stories like that...
And the boss of that estate is the same boss as the boss of the estate on Pratamnak Hill, and that person was, and for the record, a former president of the Rotary Club up until this year. And I should clarify that's Pattaya Jomtien as opposed to the other 6.
Right. I think right at the beginning of this conversation you were very clear and you said that there are some scammers that come here. And the one thing about a scammer is if you're a good scammer, you're going to be able to... I'm not saying that anybody particularly by name is, but if you're a scammer, it's very, very easy to scam people because you're a professional at it. So if you've got an organisation that appears to be looking good, it would be very easy for somebody, if they wanted to and were of that ilk, they could very easily squeeze in and scam them, couldn't they?
Yeah, but I think that's not the problem about the scam. The problem is, having been scammed, what you can do about it. And the problem is that nobody, in the moment, is helping the people in Pattaya who are being scammed. And the local media certainly aren't. I mean, where do we read about the victims in the local press?
Well, actually, we are, because you're now on an international radio show being listened to by millions, going out over the internet, and you're able to tell their story.
Yes, but it's a local story, and people in LA and London are not really interested in guys being scammed in Pattaya. It's not a major news story.
Right, we do have one listener that lives in Pattaya, so
I mean, I do, and I'm obviously, my income comes from foreign press, but half the stories I do, which go up on this website, andrew-drummond.com, they're only for that website. They're not going to go much further.
Right.
Because people will say, news editors will say abroad, Pattaya, corruption, foreigner, why are foreigners in Pattaya? There's so many negative things that knocks that story out of the paper.
You see, the thing is that if you're running a blog, you can type anything, can't you? Whereas on the media, we have to comply with all sorts of things and make sure that whatever we say is 120%. Do you have to worry about that if you're running a blog?
That is absolute rubbish. Absolute rubbish. My blog consists mainly of news stories and investigations. If we publish an investigation that's wrong, I can be sued as close as the next man. You see,
there's a story that's running in one of the local papers that tells me that actually you did get sued by a local business and they found you guilty, and apparently you lost a lot of money and allegedly a car.
Well, actually, that's wrong. I was sued. I took on, and I can tell you what it is. I took on a local business in Boys Town, and they sued me for libel. They won at the first court, and I was acquitted completely at appeal.
Right. Ah, okay. That's the rest of the story. We only got half of the story in the newspaper.
What the point is, if you're probably reading that in a paper like, say, the Pattaya Times, then you might get the wrong impression.
Yeah, because you just told me the rest. Who was the American guy that used to do a beautiful thing? I've forgotten his name, and it was called The Rest of the Story. Do you know him? Paul Harvey, his name was, and he used to tell you half the story, and then he'd say, and now for the rest of the story, and he would finish the story, and suddenly you'd realise it was a completely different slant on it. So you didn't get done for it at the end of the day. You got exonerated.
I was exonerated, and it's all over the net. The fact it was made a lot of publicity in the UK at the time because we were taking on owners of a gay commercial sex business who had I claimed ripped off people who were investing in that business.
Right, I did read the report.
Sorry?
I did read your story.
Right. Okay.
So what can you tell us about this estate?
The court has ruled that story is true now, and ruled that it was in the public interest. But we had to go to the appeal court to do that.
And how long did that take?
That should have clearly happened at the first stage.
How long did that take to get to the appeal court?
It's 9 years.
God, that's really got to be a pain in the neck for you.
Well, I mean, that's an indication of what will happen to people if they have problems in Pattaya. Yeah, the line dropped.
Oh, yeah, I guess that's what happened. It's all right, it's playing music now.
All right, okay.
Now, I've got to ask you, because seriously now, nobody can hear us, as I told you. You didn't read I hope you got the email. Now we're talking and we're playing music. Absolutely nobody can hear us except you and me. Is it all right to talk about this boiler room scandal in Bangkok?
Yeah, it's okay to talk about boiler room scandal in Bangkok.
Because you posted...
You've had enough of Pattaya now, have you?
No. I'm just interested, because I'm the bad guy, remember? You ran a story that was close to home, and then you took it off your blog. I don't want to say that unless you're happy with me saying that.
Well, no, I'm not going to go into that.
Okay, what about other stories that are running around Bangkok that you've done as well, not Pattaya?
I mean, what about the way you started off? You said all these allegations have been made.
Yeah.
And I can deal with them, but you have to say, but I read them in the Pattaya Times. Then I'll answer it.
Oh, okay, I could do that, and then we could talk about this estate up on around Mapachan.
Right.
What else would you like to talk about?
Well, you can talk, anything. If you want to go back, I don't know, whatever. You can talk about my career. You can talk about, what I did before I came here. You can talk about anything. You can talk, what other stories we've done. I've done lots of TV docs, of course. That's
what we get. That's going to be a good angle. We'll talk about what you've done. Good idea. Manic Street Preacher's there, if you tolerate this, and hopefully back on the line, Andrew Drummond. Are you still there?
Yes, I'm back here, Tom.
I don't know what happened there. The telephone system around here is not the best sometimes. No, I was asking you, but you went off. When I was a kid, news was 15 minutes a day on the BBC. That was it. It was repeated at 6 and 9 o'clock at night. Now it's 24-hour news. Do you think that in general, newspapers and media are gagging for stories? Must be very hard to fill 24 hours of news.
No, not particularly, because I think the sources of news stories have multiplied considerably. I mean, everybody, in a way, is a reporter nowadays. If you see something in the street, you might be inclined to ring up a newspaper and tell them what happened. But everybody's, communicating. There's so much material up there on the net, and in fact, the news business is becoming slightly less interesting for a journalist, say, on the spot like me, because a lot of it's just rewriting the net.
Because, we're reading in the UK right now. I know you said you work for the News of the World. I don't know how long you work for them. But the News of the World, or actually it's, what's his name? It's the people that own Sky, isn't it? The media group. And now huge government inquiries into the way that they get stories.
Yeah, I mean, I've been watching it daily, the Leveson inquiry. It's appalling. But I mean, I left the News of the World, for instance, 25 years ago. As I said, when we didn't have bloody phones and stuff. I was there primarily when it was a broadsheet newspaper and had a very good reputation on investigations. I think that the News of the World always had its tarts and vicars stories, but It's justification. I mean, certainly when I was there, we turned over, the flying squad at the yard. And there were big targets that newspapers were taking on.
But it was known as the news of the screws, wasn't it?
It always has been. It sort of became quite malicious, and it has become quite malicious in the last 20 years.
Now, I'm not being nasty to you. I'm just going to ask you straight out. You are posting stories about alleged stories about allegations about what's going on with people who run a particular newspaper in Pattaya. They're posting stories about what a nasty person you are. We're the readers. We're stupid. Well, at least I am. How do we know which one to believe? How should we decide?
Well, I mean, it's very easy. You just look at both stories and you decide yourself, because some stories are carry quotes from known people, and the stories in the Pattaya Times it's rather sort of invented.
It does.
I mean, I think you find that this all started when we revealed that the publisher of the Pattaya Times had been exposed in the United States long before he came to Thailand, where a newspaper had done a 2-page coverage on his activities there, and we repeated that and showed what and it showed the various. I mean, he was also claiming to be a lawyer. He was claiming to be the only American lawyer licensed to practice in Thailand.
Right.
He was claiming his Pattaya Times sold 500,000 copies. It prints 5,000 and sells 500. But you have to bear in mind that people coming to Pattaya and becoming publishers are not journalists. They're creating newspapers as vehicles for their own projection.
Right.
And what we can do is actually show these people for what they are.
Right. Now, obviously, as I said earlier on, the opinions that you express are your opinions, and they're not those necessarily of Pattaya 105 FM. I have to make that very, very clear.
Yeah, I can also like to make it clear that I only talk in facts. So anything I'm saying, I can back up with the evidence.
No, I appreciate you told me that earlier on off air. What have you been doing since you've been in Thailand, apart from these exposés that you've been doing recently? What have you been doing in your career? What's been keeping you busy?
Well, I mean, bearing in mind I've been in the region for 25 plus years, or 25 years anyway. I mean, I first came to the region when I was doing, there were a lot of people getting hanged in Malaysia for drugs trafficking. And I was, I suppose, the journalist ghoul at these trials. And I came across to Thailand, quite liked it. And did quite a few investigations in Thailand. We did quite a few television documentaries for BBC and ITV in the UK. Went to live with, for instance, a drugs warlord, Kun Sar in Burma. We exposed a drug syndicate, and that was an amazing round-the-world trip.
What did you do? Did you go undercover for that?
No, what we did was we got hold of, there was a major drugs trial happening in the UK, but we got hold, or I got hold of a witness statement that had never been given to the British police, and that was from a guy arrested in Malaysia, and who told the whole story from start to finish. And this guy was facing execution in Malaysia. And we followed him. We followed all the links he provided, all the names he provided, and confronted these people in America, in the UK. The trip took us from London to New York, San Francisco, Dallas, Fort Worth, around the States, and then back to Malaysia and Japan. And at the end of the day, we exposed the one that got away.
And what sort of effect did that have on the trial?
Well, the trial, he was not included in the trial. Mm-hmm. A number of people went down for a period of, I think the biggest sentence was 29 years. So we were working with British Customs and Excise drugs team Foxtrot at the time. So, it was a bit of a combined effort. So we were giving them, they were giving us stuff.
So
the sort of cooperation you don't get nowadays.
That's what I was going to ask you. I mean, you're surprising me now, because now I'm hearing that a newspaper reporter or reporters are actually working together with the government, together with the police, and together with all the various authorities. I didn't even know that happened. Well,
there was a lot of trading of information, certainly in my days. I mean, I'm still, a little bit gobsmacked, because most of them, I used to go out and see policemen and customs drugs investigators all the time. I went on holiday with a couple of two,
Did you all used to meet? I've seen them, like in the telly. Did you all used to meet in the pub? Here, John, do you want a beer? Yeah, come over here. I've got a story for you. All right, mate. Well, here's a fiver. It didn't work like that.
this way, it's very much life on Mars.
Yeah.
There was a relationship, because then we didn't have the internet. They don't need the press so much now, because they've got the internet, they put out their own statements and all that sort of stuff. And I think you find that the press has pissed off the police, pardon my English, so much in the last 20 years. That's the way they prefer it.
So it doesn't work like that anymore.
No, a lot of information is not coming out.
Right.
And a lot of people not getting nicked too.
Well, probably as a result, yeah. I guess more as a team effort. So today, there isn't the same. Because how long have you been a reporter?
Since about 68, 69, 70.
God,
I was on the Daily Mail in 73. So
I was in short trousers then.
Yeah, I'm sure you were, Tom.
I was, seriously. The Daily Mail then was a big newspaper, wasn't it? It wasn't like today. It was what would you call? You called it a broadsheet, I think. The full-size newspapers.
No, it'd gone. It'd actually gone. It'd gone tabloid when I was on it. But it was still massive. It was still massive. The Daily Express was massive. Of course, the Daily Express had more correspondents all over the world than any other newspaper, even the Times and Telegraph. So things have changed a lot. I mean, I think I was lucky to be there in the heyday of Fleet Street when you've got a lot of money and a lot of expenses, and I've put my hands up to this. You've made a lot of profit on expenses too.
Were you? Because I remember the stories. My dad worked in London. He worked very close to Fleet Street. Was it true were you one of these guys that was permanently pissed from 2:00 on the afternoon?
I think certainly on a Sunday newspaper, on a Tuesday, everybody was out to lunch all day. The newsroom just had jackets hanging on chairs, and there were no, as you say, there were no bleepers, and there were no mobile phones, so nobody could hassle you. The news editor had to guess which pub you were in.
So do you think today, newspaper reading, people who physically buy a newspaper and read it, obviously it's dropped off because you've got the internet now. It used to be where everybody here would go and buy, it was 250 baht, I think, to get a copy of the Daily Mail, whereas now you can just go and read it on the internet. What kind of effect do you think that's had on newspapers?
Well, I think they're all suffering, and the ones that can adapt will survive. I think the Daily Mail seems to be surviving very well because it's got a massive internet readership.
Yes.
And it's selling advertising to go with that. Whereas the Times has got a firewall up there, and it's Times. I mean, I was with the Times until 2 years ago, and I sort of left them during the Red demonstrations for specific reasons. But the Times now is down to something like 400,000 circulation. That's about the size of a very big local paper. Maybe evening paper in Birmingham.
So Andrew Drummond, who obviously is an experienced writer, you're obviously an experienced journalist, there's no question about that. I know nothing about journalism, but obviously you are an experienced journalist, you've been doing it for years. Andrew Drummond writing for newspapers, Andrew Drummond working on, I think you said film or TV production. Now Andrew Drummond has a blog. How does that work? How do you get listeners? How do you get readers?
Well, they float in, don't they? They float in all the time, and it's word of mouth. It's the reason for this blog is not it's not an ego thing. It's just to let people know what stories are out there which aren't making the papers abroad. Sometimes if I'm doing a story abroad and it's not hitting, I'll put it up on site. And the other thing is nobody's doing these sort of investigations. I've got quite a lot of experience in doing them, and I know how to progress them.
Right, now,
and we've got people here that can actually help us. So I'm not cowering in fear of the problem about people in Pattaya in particular. If they get into trouble, most people in Pattaya are there for fun. They're there for a holiday, or they know the system and they want to keep out of it. They don't want any trouble.
Right.
So if somebody's got a real problem in Pattaya, they've got nobody to go to, except maybe these guys that are offering their services on a financial basis.
Why do you think it's any different here than Bangkok, where you live?
It's not any. These things happen in Bangkok too, but not. I mean, Pattaya is a massive tourist and expat destination,
right.
Whereas the foreigners in Bangkok tend to be more businessmen, or working for UN, embassies and that sort of stuff.
Oh, come on. Not being nasty to you, because everybody people who live in Bangkok like to knock Pattaya. Oh, I live in Bangkok, I don't live in Pattaya, that's sort of riffraff. Let me tell you, there's just as much going on in Bangkok as there is in Pattaya. There's just as much badness going on in Bangkok. There's just as much seedy side in Bangkok as there is in Pattaya. This is quite a nice city. It's no different, really, than any other fun city, is it?
Well, okay, Tom, I've got the advert for Pattaya, but I mean, I think you'll find that demographic of both cities is quite different.
Well, obviously, yes, I would agree in Bangkok. You do get business people, but you get a lot of tourists.
It does not have this vast sex trade going on seemingly almost 24 hours. Bangkok has 3 streets that probably the locals go to, and one that even Patpong's died, isn't it?
I don't know.
It's sort of take it from me, it's virtually it's on its last legs.
So you start a blog, and people come and read your blog on a regular basis, and I know they do. And obviously that keeps you busy. First of all, 2 questions for you really. The first one is, where do you get your stories from? Do they come to you, or do people call you, or how do you get the stories? Well,
a lot come to me now because of the blog.
Right.
Because we've got that sort of credibility. People can see how stories progress on this blog, and they get satisfaction. I think at least they can get their story out. Others, well, they're all coming in, and I'm talking to people, the normal ways. But that's just for the blog. I've got a real job, which is actually doing stories for newspapers.
I was going to ask you this. I was going to ask you actually whether your blog was a substitute for a real job. Now you're telling me you do have a real job as well.
Well, there's an element. I think there's, maybe I'll joke about it, there's an element of truth there, because there's certain stuff that it's harder and harder to get stuff into newspapers, despite the fact that you say there's so many of them. My income, I would say, was considerably less than it was even 2 years ago, and that is, and also I'm getting on a bit now, so I've got kids, I tend to relax more and that sort of stuff.
Right, so Andrew, you're getting on a bit, right, and you're printing some stories which are, let's just call them controversial. In some instances, they're very controversial stories, and you're living in Thailand, and obviously, I believe you're married and you have a family here, right?
That's right, I got 2 kids here.
Right, are you not scared sometimes? Not being funny, I'd be a bit scared if I was pissing the wrong person off. You're not worried about that?
No, but you've got the wrong assumptions. The only threats I would get would be from people that are exposed on the site. They tend to be verbal, and their importance. All these people claim to have influential people in their tone, but the reality is quite often, most often, entirely different. And in fact, the system in Thailand can work of sorts. Mm-hmm. Obviously, the legal system is painfully slow, but there are solutions that can be provided to people.
And you find.
Am I worried about Am I worried? Well, if somebody wants to have a go at me, they can have a go at me. That's a fact of life. But this is my job. This is what I do. So why stop it because of an assumed or imagined threat?
Andrew, we're going to have a pause for the cause, have a bit of music, and when we come back, we'll have another chat. Can you just stay on the line?
Yeah, sure.
This is the Beatles. And you're tuned to Pattaya 105, and hopefully still on the other end of the line is Andrew Drummond. Are you still there?
Yes, I'm still here, Tom.
Right. Well, unfortunately, I did my usual trick. Yeah, Paul Strachan has several comments coming up on our Facebook. I did our usual trick of not turning the microphones off during that music. If I was a professional, I'd be really, really good. The rumours on Facebook, I just thought I'd share them with you in case you want a really good story. Paul Strachan, who is he's a reporter with Pattaya Mail, he says, "Hi, Tommy, good luck with the interview. Let's hope Andrew hasn't heard about you and the sheep incident." That's something for you to look into, isn't it? Barry Upton says the sheep is now in rehab. He would know. So, coming away from those 2 comments and a few others that are coming on the internet, the Fat Controller was just in, Andrew, and he asked me a very interesting question. Are you never worried that you might make somebody's life personally intolerable writing stories about them? I'm not just talking about in Thailand. I'm talking as a journalist in general. if you expose someone, are you never worried that maybe you've got it wrong?
No, I mean, I think I have to make it clear here. Had I been working on a newspaper in the UK, I think I would have certainly have those fears. One of the reasons why I quit newspapers and have never actually worked as staff for a newspaper since I left the News of the World. In fact, even the Observer, I was on a year contract at the time, is because you are susceptible to the whims of an editor. And in Thailand, I can choose pretty much what I put out and what I do. So a lot of people trust us in Thailand, and they know they're not going to be turned over.
Right. I mean, you do have sources of information. People come to you and say, "Look, Andrew, I've got this story. Do you want to try it out?" and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, there are big stories that we can't avoid. I mean, I think a few years ago there was some Labour MP got involved with a Thai massage girl.
No, really? That must have been a really big story over
And I think we had to go fly down to Chumpon to interview her, and I'm sure that didn't, cheer up the MP, but I didn't feel particularly sorry about it. I mean, I think even from newspapers, I don't remember going after some poor innocent victim. And in the stuff I'm doing now, certainly we're not. We don't go.
Okay,
we certainly don't. We certainly don't go for innocent victims.
Right. Going back to that story you were just talking about as an example, I'm not bothered who the MP was. You find out that somebody famous is behaving misappropriately with a younger woman other than his wife. Is that, I mean, apart from the fact that it's sensational and maybe somebody wants to read it so they can drool over it in a newspaper, is it really news? Is it really something that's worth reporting? Why?
Well, I mean, that's a different issue, and it's not something I haven't been involved in I can't remember. Probably at the News of the World we would have done MPs and politicians. And I think you're probably right. It's not news. It's not news. But the definition of news is being rewritten.
What is the definition of news today?
It's being rewritten every year, and I think newspapers went on the adage that news is what somebody wants to read today. That's probably it's news under that definition. But whether it's what is news? Is news what the BBC does? Is the news what CNN does? Quite often we disagree with that. Sometimes they give us stuff we don't want to watch. I mean, but we've been told that's news.
To be honest,
news is what. It's down to the individual, to be honest. What is news to their own taste? I think.
You were talking earlier on about the Daily Mail, which has a fantastic internet presence, and I must admit, it's one of the ones that I cruise first thing when I wake up in the morning with a cup of coffee and a cigarette. One of the things that bugs me, it's not my problem because I just read it and basically it's free on the internet, they let anybody read it, but one of the things that bugs me and kind of is, the first 5 stories are all about X Factor. That doesn't appeal to me, but I guess the newspapers, it's what the general person wants to read.
Well, I think, first of all, I mean, there's two Daily Mails. There's the online version and the print version. And the print version doesn't have all those showbiz stories that are down on the right-hand side of the internet version.
Oh, right.
Because on the internet version, they're going for a worldwide, lots of American stories too on the Daily Mail now. So there are two different things. I mean, you're looking at showbiz. Traditionally, you're looking at the Sun, News of the World, the Mirror, Daily Star, that sort of stuff. They're the ones that are really going heavy on showbiz. Yes, it bores me to tears, but obviously it doesn't bore other people.
No, it has an audience. If you were to, what are the 2 biggest stories that you've done since you've been in Thailand? The 2 most interesting?
Well, I don't know. The ones that have got the most publicity, I suppose, would be, tracking down Gary Glitter and, sending him back to London.
Oh, you were involved in that?
Yeah, I tracked down, together with Andy Chan, I tracked down Gary Glitter, but that was actually for the News of the World. And having said that, my byline didn't appear in the paper on that one, thank God, because the way it was written was just pretty appalling.
Now, that's an interesting question.
And we also tracked down the guy called Michael Stackpole, who was Jeffrey Archer's right-hand man.
Oh, right.
The row over Jeffrey Archer,
Sir Jeffrey Archer.
Well, he's not anymore. He committed perjury and and then he sent this aid away to hide in Thailand, and of course Michael Stackpole knew the truth of what was going on, so we tracked him down to the Winchester Bar, actually, in Pattaya.
Did you? Which no longer exists, so we're not responsible for it. Question, but you said something very interesting there when you were talking about Paul Michael Gadd, who went under the name of Gary Glitter, and nobody likes him. You mentioned something there. You were rather glad because they didn't use your written report because it was so badly reported. How does that work? If you were a journalist, or say I was a journalist writing a story for a newspaper anywhere, it could be in Pattaya, it could be in Bangkok, it could be in England. If I write a story, aren't they kind of honour bound to they want?
Okay, sorry, I missed you there for a second.
Okay, if I'm writing a story, if I'm a journalist and I write a story and I supply my stories to a newspaper, it could be Pattaya, could be Bangkok, it could be London. Haven't I got a right that it's going to be printed the way I write it?
No.
Really?
No newspaper, not even the Times, Guardian, Telegraph. No, because there's so many other considerations. There's space considerations. There's legal considerations. If you're writing for the heavies, of course, the end result is going to be a lot closer to what you originally wrote.
Right.
But it will never be exactly the same.
Ah.
If you're writing for a popular, you won't probably recognise your story at the end of the day. I mean that is a fact of life, because you've maybe written 600 words and they're using 200. But what is alarming is the amount of stuff coming out recently where people are adding quotes to your story from unnamed people and that sort of stuff, which is
yeah, because this is a bit that always gets me. Now, trust me, because I only read. I don't write. I'm a bit thick. But I read a story, and it'll be written, say, in a newspaper, and it'll be a story by Fred Blogs, and it'll be through the story. An unnamed friend mentioned that an unnamed source. This information came from. Do you think they really make those stories up, or do they actually get them from unnamed sources?
I mean, there are stories that have unnamed sources, of course, but I think in I would say 70% of the cases, or maybe 50%, there aren't. It's difficult to guess now because I've actually been out of the street for quite a while. But certainly, the regime on every newspaper I've been on has been fairly strict. And if you're not quoting somebody, in my day, you'd have to tell the news editor why not, and you'd have to supply a memo. Why not? Why is this person not being named?
So of all the stories you're working on right now on your blog and for the newspapers, I have no idea what you're working on for real newspapers. Which are the ones that you think are the ones that really the highlight stories that you're running at the moment?
Well, I obviously can't tell you what I'm doing at the moment.
Why? Go on, tell us. It's only between you and me. Nobody else is listening. This is 105.
Right. No, at the moment I'm doing 3 projects that probably won't come to fruition until probably a month's time. The day-to-day stuff, I mean, I'll do it if it comes up. So I'll probably, this afternoon, be having a gin and tonic in the garden.
What a lovely life. What a lovely
but
life.
I mean, that's what it is. It can be long moments of boredom and days of excitement.
And of the stories you're running on your blog right now, which one do you think is the one that you feel most emotional about?
Well, I mean, we've got 2 sort of what have almost become campaigns at the moment. One against a property developer who's apparently being investigated. Well, he is being investigated by the Pattaya Consumers Affairs Department and others. And one about a newspaper owner who's producing a paper which we've pointed out is primarily lifted off the internet, but also running these other businesses where Farangs or foreigners are suffering. So those are the two major ones that are going out on the blog.
Right. Now,
I think we're doing stuff in Cambodia as well at the moment. It will come out probably in the next 24 hours of various...
Earlier on, you were saying that sourcing information now is completely different because you have the internet. Now, just supposing I was running a newspaper, we'll call it Tommy's Son, and I was lifting information from the internet. What's wrong with that? It's still fulfilling a need. It's making it easy to produce a newspaper and keeping costs down. Why is that wrong?
Well, it's theft. B, it's not journalism. I mean, in fact, Tom, you could put together a paper, and it's been proved in Pattaya by just lifting a whole load of stories from the internet and putting your own column on the front page, or your own story.
And my picture, and my picture, Andrew.
Nothing, okay. It's not, I mean, there's a certain amount of lifting goes on all the time, even in Fleet Street. Although people are actually bothering to rewrite. The internet is a great tool, as a information tool to use. But if you're just lifting somebody else's story, you're stealing that story. That guy's, obviously put in some work to do it. And the point is, at the end of the day, you won't sell a newspaper, and as is shown in Pattaya, the newspaper in question is not selling. It's a vehicle for the man to go to City Hall.
So, when you write this blog, and I know you update it regularly, and you have people that write into you, and you post their posts on there, are you doing it to be informative, or are you doing it because you're on a vendetta?
No, I don't have vendettas against anybody. I mean, that's the we're running a campaign now. It's traditional. You run a campaign until that campaign, pays off, I suppose. And if more and more stuff comes out, I mean, it's a bit like The Guardian writing about the news of the world. They went on and on and on and on until somebody actually listened. So there's no vendetta. I mean, the people that to be honest, I haven't met either of the people I'm writing about.
Right, but in one particular newspaper, there was a report a little while ago that said that that you were actually under investigation yourself as a result of what you were printing. Doesn't that scare you?
No, because it was a load of rubbish. We went to see the police and said, "What's all this about?" And they said, "No, it's a load of crap."
Okay.
I think I had totally made it up. That was apparently there were police looking for me all over Thailand. I was under arrest and whatever you. I mean,
and that your internet provider or your blog, wherever you post your blog, the people there were going to take it off because they'd been advised you were doing something illegal as well.
Say again?
And that the internet, I'm not quite sure what the names are. The actual.
Let me finish on that. I mean, that was quite true. And we looked at the letter from the MICT, and we looked at the name of the guy. And I called up the guy. He'd actually called my internet guy on one occasion. I said, "Give me the number," and I'd call this guy up. And I called up the guy from the MICT, and he went into blind panic. I mean, he said, "Oh no, I'm retired. This is something. The guy. I think you'll find the letter from the police in Pattaya, because it was a policeman in Pattaya. It wasn't.
Right. So that
it was a policeman known by this particular person who sent a letter, and it was illegal. It was illegal to do it in that way. Anyway, you can't. A policeman can't just write to MICT and demand a site be taken down. There are due processes to go through.
Yeah, I mean, there's a legal process here as there would be in any other good country. You're working with these guys up at this estate on Maprachan Lake, where the property developer, for some reason, has taken out their electricity and water supplies to homes that they actually own and got chenoots for, or their wives have.
And they already bought their meters, and they bought their meters.
How's that progressing?
Well, to be honest, I don't know. I haven't checked on that in the last couple of days. But the residents are certainly having a meeting. I think it's on the 3rd, in a couple of days' time, to throw the developer off their management committee, and so they take control of their estate.
So do you think that by publicising stories like that one, it helps them?
Yeah, of course it does.
In what way?
Well, I mean, they had support. What happened was a bunch of henchmen came round and started, pulling out the plumbing.
That's scary. Yeah, that's scary.
We can go on and say, look, this is the guy who did this. It's a load of cobblers. He's committed a criminal offence by doing it, and they are glad of the support.
Andrew, let me ask you a final question.
He will get support, because if he does this again, he will come up again on the blog.
Let me ask you a final question, Andrew, because we are coming up to. We've skipped the international news. I just talked. Well, you and I talked through it. We're coming up to local news now, so we do have to have a break. But a question for you: if you were looking back on your career, and it's obviously been a long one, what would you see as your biggest success?
Oh, it's hard to say. I mean, I got an award many years ago for investigations into fascists and other right-wing groups in Europe. And that involved becoming a Nazi for about 18 months.
I could see you doing that, actually. Did you grow a moustache?
In which, no, I didn't bother with a moustache, but I had sort of fairy hair at the time, so and I learned the horse vessel song and that sort of stuff. And no, but we did some quite serious stuff, and we went on out to Europe and infiltrated these groups, and with meetings with SS guys and with the fascists from MI6 who were bombing in Italy at the time, and. So it was a worthwhile project, and that was, I would say, much more riskier than what I'm doing here in Thailand.
When you look back in your life, are you glad that you chose journalism as a career?
I am, but I wouldn't recommend my kids to go into it now.
That was going to be my second question, actually. Would you recommend it to your kids?
I wouldn't, because it's changed. I mean, I think part of the fact of journalism, it was a vehicle to take you around the world, and journalism's taken me around the world on a number of occasions, and in the days of travelling first and business class. So it's a great feeling to be sent out on a story, and you're being treated like royalty. You get to your destination, you hire the biggest car you can probably get, put down the sunroof, turn up the music, and head out on the story. It's had great moments.
Well, you obviously, from what you've been saying in the last hour, you've had a fantastic life, mate. You've obviously enjoyed what you do, and you obviously enjoy what you're doing now. Andrew, can I thank you for coming on the show?
Not at all.
And maybe you'll come and join us again. I've just got to say, if you are any other party that's been involved in this conversation and you'd like to take part in this show, all you have to do is email me, Tommy@Pattaya105.com. And once again, per the Fat Controller, here, Tommy, you've got to say this. The opinions expressed during this conversation are not those necessarily of Pattaya 105 FM, but either of the quoted source or the guest. Andrew, thanks a lot for joining us.
Okay, cheers.
Take care.